So I didn't mean for all of these videos to be in my car when I'm driving, like they are. So I'm driving somewhere, and um, so the thing I wanted to talk about for my second video is what camera you should buy, and it's a complicated question because it's based on when, which right now is now, which is July 10th, 2020, but you watch this 6 months from now and it'll be out of date. So, um, and it also depends on how much money you have. Um, you can, for a interchangeable lens camera, you can spend anywhere from a couple hundred to 6,000. And if you're spending 6,000, you're not watching me on YouTube. You're watching, I don't know, Peter Lindgren or whatever his name is, or somebody. But so, I just want to talk you through some things to think about. Um, First of all, is which system you get into. Uh, I think probably the cheapest point of entry would be Micro Four Thirds, but there's a lot of people. There's an assumption that Micro Four Thirds will maybe not be around. But the flip side of that is, why do you care? Because if you buy, a good body you like and 3, 4 lenses, it's going to work. It's not like it's going to stop working if Micro Four Thirds kind of goes away. I've never used one. I considered it. I really like depth of field. I like So what happened to me is I got spoiled because at work I used a full frame camera, and I'd only had an ASPC, which is the not full frame but not Micro Four Thirds. It's kind of in the middle there. I'd only had that, and I liked it. It was a Nikon D80. I'll probably drag that out, talk about it at some point. So about 8 months ago, I kind of got back into this thing and started reading about it obsessively, like I do. And I was like, well, at work we have big, nice Canons. I can't afford a big, nice Canon. So I bought into the Canon M series, which is their like crop sensor is what it's called, mirrorless system, which they're kind of replacing with their new R full frame system now. So it's a little, in some ways you could say that well, at the time it could have been considered a dying system. Since then they released another camera for it, and I think they're coming out. I don't know if they're coming out with any lenses for it or not, but at the end of the day, it probably wouldn't have mattered, because I bought a 22 millimeter prime lens, which on a full frame would be like a 35, which is, a good, general focal length. And then I bought their zoom lens, which was like a 18 to 150, and I was kind of set. I had, and really what happened, the reason I got rid of it is I just wanted a full frame, and I went Sony instead of the Canon mirrorless full frames, but that's a whole nother thing. But the point of all this rambling is, like, that camera is fine. Like, the only real problem I had with that camera, other than wanting full frame, was that it didn't have a viewfinder. You can buy a lot of mirrorless cameras that are just kind of like just have a screen on the back, right? And I'm 45 and getting old, and I'm like, holding things out like an old man. But if I look through a viewfinder, I'm good. And also, when you're shooting zoom, it's I don't know if it's just because I've always done it that way. It's just weird to, like, concentrate on what you're taking a photo of if you're looking at it on a screen, rather than shoving a screen near your eye. I don't know. But all that said, Sony makes a ton of crop sensor. Canon's crop sensor are cheap now because everyone's wanting their full frame ones. You could get into a Canon M50 or There's another one, the Mark 6 II. I think you can buy a little viewfinder for it if you have. You might not want a viewfinder. Maybe you have good eyes and that doesn't bother you. And then Nikon doesn't really have that. They have their Z series, which look nice, but they're expensive. Like there is a cheap one. It's like the Z50, but that's $800. So all that said, what should you buy? If you just want a really good cheap camera, and you don't even care about mirrorless, although you should care about mirrorless. Maybe I'll talk about that in a minute. A good cheap old camera would be a Canon 6D. Okay, it's full frame. I think you can probably get a used one for $400, $500, $600. It's slow. It only shoots like four frames a second. But I mean, at this point, like if you're trying to shoot like sports or something fast action, you're going to spend more money anyways. But if you buy that, you can also then start buying some really cheap, great Canon glass, like a Canon 50 1.8 is like $100, and it's great. They have a 35 that's great. They have even their like almost kit lens kind of stuff is great. You can get used L glass. L's the fancy super Canon glass. You can get a fantastic the 85 1.8 is like $200 or $300 used. And that's a great way to start. Like that's if I was just starting. So SLRs, DSLRs, that's what like all the people I know who are professionals shoot with, right? And there's some scoffing when I was talking mirrorless with them, but I don't think they've realized yet, and I think it's this recent announcement by Canon that I talked about in my last video. It is kind of the wake-up call, because Sony's been out on an island doing their thing, putting out very high-quality mirrorless systems, and everyone else is like, well, but the SLR, So what you miss by buying an SLR, really, the thing that is transformative to me is that when you compose your shot with a mirrorless camera and you adjust settings, you actually see what the shot's going to look like. Now, it's not the exact same, because the viewfinders aren't that great of quality, at least on the Sony I have, the A7 III. The newer one has like an insane, and the Canon ones just announced are apparently very, very good viewfinders. So that's what you miss. But at the same time, if it was my first camera and I just wanted quality, because I'm telling you that 6D is a fantastic camera. Like the pictures it puts out are as good as the $4,000, $6,000 cameras. It doesn't have the range. There's bells and whistles it does not have. But overall, like, it's a fantastic camera. I would suggest it to anyone. But if you want to go entry-level mirrorless, I mean, my only experience with that is a camera we bought for work, which is the RP, the Canon RP, which is the cheapest mirrorless full-frame camera you can buy. And with the recent announcements, I bet you can find a used one for $700, $800. That's still a lot of money. So at that point, if that's too much for you, I think you gotta look at those Sonys. Now, I went and held the Sonys, the crop sensor Sonys they're like 6,000 through like 6,700. I don't know, and it's all confusing because like the 6,100's newer than the 6,300 or something. It's insanity, to be honest with you. But I went and held one when I was looking around, and they feel like a small brick with a slight grip on it. And like I don't have monstrously huge hands, but like my whole bottom half of my hand was falling off the thing, so I was holding it like a claw. And I guess you could probably buy some kind of attachment for grown man holding this camera, but it was just too small for me. But that might not bother you. I think it's definitely they're good, apparently great. I mean, they shoot fast, like 8, 9, 10 frames a second, so you could go shoot birds in flight and stuff like that with them. And They use the same lenses as the camera I got, but they also have their own little system of lenses that are much more affordable than the ones for the full frame. Um, and I'm sure you could adapt. I mean, that's one of the reasons I went with the Sony is that I spent $100 on an adapter, and I can go buy a Canon lens, and it'll mostly work. I mean, I've only tried a few lenses, but I haven't had a single problem with it. I mean, I'm sure the native ones are better, but so I mean, I guess there's some options for you. I don't know. It's so much dependent on that time and place thing. You can, um, but I would be nervous about the 4/3 stuff. I've heard great things about the Olympus cameras. The Fuji has their own system that's apparently pretty good, but I'm just like, I guess I'm a snob where, I started Nikon and then I switched over to Canon, and now personally, we have Canon stuff I use at work. But then I personally went to Sony because, I mean, what I wanted, I felt like the Sony had the best, and I think I can use that Sony for 3, 4, 5 years and be really happy with it. So that's why I did that. But people love the new Nikon stuff. It's just I'm not diving back into that, even though I have some old Nikon stuff sitting in the house. But I hope this helps. I felt like this is a little more boring, but also a little more. I think I'm kind of doing this to help people. Maybe you stumble across this. Like that was my hope. I'm not really like telling the world I've started a YouTube channel. I know exactly what I'm doing. It's more about I'm hoping that people like me stumbling across the internet, searching for which camera should I buy July 2020, which is probably the clickbaity name I'll call this. Maybe this helps, maybe this doesn't. Leave me a comment if you stumble across this. Maybe it's the future and you stumbled across it and it's hilariously out of date, which will be amusing. I come across those sometimes. I enjoy that. And talk to you later.